Con ustedes, Robert ZAMANI, Director of Engineers de Malwarebytes.
Welcome one, welcome all. I will be talking about protecting your organization from the business of ransomware, not just ransomware in and of itself, but there is a business, a burgeoning business that has a complete model behind it. A little bit about myself, Robert ZAMANI. I manage the Americas SEs for Malwarebytes. I've been in the industry for, gosh, I would say more than 25 years. I don't like to necessarily tell anybody about that, but I will start off on a lighter subject. I used to work, or I started my career in the United States at UC San Francisco in osteoporosis research. I am not a doctor by any means or stretch. I am a computer science graduate, and I was working for osteoporosis research, working with SAS, statistical analysis systems, and Fortran, writing Fortran code. And, you know, they would give me the formulas. I would say, oh, statistically, here are the patterns that you'd see it. And I framed the patterns. And somebody along the way came along and said, oh, Robert, that's machine learning. We're doing machine learning. And then it came to what is most people are calling deep learning or artificial intelligence. I will tell you, I know I'm making a joke out of this. Please understand that it is meant to be lighthearted. I am just letting you know that there are challenges with deep learning. There are challenges with artificial intelligence specifically. And of course, machine learning has come a long way, whether it's assisted machine learning or unassisted machine learning. That's up to you. And it's beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about, but that's just so you know. And please don't say, oh, Robert, you don't understand deep learning. You know, if you went to a CISO and you said, hey, we have deep learning and, you know, this is constantly learning by itself, it doesn't require any assistance, that isn't going to work. So again, just a lighthearted conversation and to tell you a little bit about my background. Now on to a more serious topic, the $312,000 per ransomware attack. Yes, it's a bit specific, but actually it's approximately $300,000. You know, some places it's 290, some places it's 350, but on average it's around $300,000 per ransomware attack. The interesting part is perhaps where it says 11 seconds, every 11 seconds there's a ransomware attack. Now, statistically, it's happening so often, so much, that if you average it out, it is one every 11 seconds. So right now, by the time I finish, there will be many ransomware attacks. So already there's been at least 3 or 4. Why is that is a topic that I'm going to get into a little bit more. You can look up these articles for yourself. CBS News, MarketWatch has written a lot about this, but it's right there in the tagline that you see. Ransomware is booming as a business model. And the second tagline, ransomware boom comes from gangs that operate like cloud software unicorns, meaning that they offer a service and the service is so well organized that it has its own technical support, that it will even walk anybody who's not knowledgeable through the process of purchasing Bitcoin and transferring those Bitcoins to the correct account so that the ransom should be paid. It is a business that actually sells the technique, sells the attack, and guarantees returns on it. So as a result, it's just a whole industry. Yes, it is a dark and it is a malicious industry. Nonetheless, it is a business model that has attracted a lot of attention. As a result, it is becoming much, much more popular. Tactics, techniques, and procedures. I am not talking about the specific tactics that they would use on an endpoint. I'm just talking about the overarching tactics and techniques and procedures that they use. The one that most on bottom left-hand corner of your screen, I'm specifically referring to exploiting fear. The one that unfortunate for many, has been exploited, both in North America, South America, and across the world, in Europe as well, for that matter. It has been COVID-19, the pandemic itself, should I say, where people are searching for answers. They're searching for where to get vaccinated, how to get vaccinated, if they can get vaccinated, or when to schedule their vaccine. And they would exploit that. Those searches are exploited. And all it takes is simply an email that says, oh, to quickly schedule your vaccine, please click here, or please come to this particular website. So misguiding people that are not necessarily into cybersecurity and understand what the links are, or to examine a hyperlink, or to examine what the hyperlink is asking for, or the web page is asking for, that is exploited. So yes, it does get exploited, but and has been exploited, but it is not just COVID-19. It's many other, I want to say many other medical situations or circumstances that have been exploited. Gathering intel. Once you know a little bit about your, I want to say, target, you can decide what you want to do. So the perpetrators are quite methodical about this. They gather intelligence about who the company is, what the company is, or who their target profile is. So if they're targeting patients of a medical institution, then their target is going to be the medical institution. They're going to find out which products they have installed. They're going to find out what backdoors they have. They're going to find out what ports are exposed. That level of intel allows them to go then and upgrade their tools. So top right-hand corner, that would be right up here, upgrading your tools. You can then go shopping, or the perpetrators, the people doing the bad stuff, should we say, they will go and say, okay, I want something that allows me to attack this particular application, that allows me to get ransom in such a way, and allows me, and when the tool is sold to the perpetrator, an income is actually guaranteed. A certain percentage of income is guaranteed. You know, it's interesting, because this is where in my previous slide I was talking about, it is a burgeoning, it is a fully structured business, where it even has technical support. And I'm sorry, it's not a funny topic, but it makes me, you know, if I laugh, it's because it's quite sad, but it's amazing that it's reached a level where, you know, you can buy tools to do such a thing. The attack, of course, in and of itself speaks for itself. You know, hit them while they're weak, because they've discovered the information that they need in order to perform and complete their attack. This information is directly from us. We, Malwarebytes, are heavily utilized, especially when you look at other anti-malware solutions. Many come to our website to download our solution and to remediate whenever they're infected by malware. Tactics and the changes to the tactics. Top 10 business malware categories for 2020 compared to 2019. Now, you might say, Robert, we're in 2021. Why are we looking at 2020? It's because it's in 2021 that we prepared the statistics for 2020. In 2020, we noticed a shift in the tactics by the perpetrators, or the bad guys, which we know they did. And the utilization of tools and processes which either blocked by our product or detected through generic signatures rather than named threats. So you might say, why am I looking at this, and what are these percentages? That you can see that in 2020, the tactics actually changed from Trojans to actual hack tools. And they changed from backdoors, which you see negative 60% reduction, to rogue type of malware. This is where it's completely targeted, and that's where we get the targeted information. So that's the purpose of this particular slide. Now I want to talk about a little bit about ransomware, like how does it work? The common workflow for how ransomware works. It's actually quite simplistic. If you're looking at the screen, there's just 3 parts. Read a file into memory, encrypt the content in memory, and then do one of 3 things. And the 3 things are, you're either going to save the encrypted file to disk while removing the original, so you do the delete operation, or you're going to write the content into the original file and then save it, or you're going to save the encrypted file to disk, then replace the original with the new one. So it's one of those things, but that's all there is to ransomware. However, if you remove the word ransomware, it's really file encryption, and encryption is built into the operating system, and it's actually quite strong encryption algorithm, especially if you've got the latest version of the operating system. So you can't disable encryption. This is misappropriation. This is misuse of a feature and functionality that's built into the operating system. So ultimately, ransomware is so simplistic, you can't disable it. In the past, the old ways, we had corporate networks. People would go into an office and they might be working from home, they would VPN in, so they go into the office, but all of the protection was placed inside the corporate network itself. So nothing needed to be on the endpoint. The corporate network would do packet sniffing, would do what's called SSL interception, or some other ways of examining what exchange was happening between the endpoints and the internet, and they'd be able to catch the threats in that way. Well, there's a mix of that environment as we shifted. As we shifted to working from home, you had the corporate network, but you now have home-based network. So yes, most of us are actually, at the moment, if not everyone, most of us are sitting at home and we're connected to the corporate network, or we may not be connected to the network. But we now have the home network, which does not have the layers and the sophistication of protection that you would get from the corporate network, where it would be doing packet sniffing, where it would be doing, you might have, let's say, network intrusion prevention or network intrusion detection, where it would be doing SSL interception, DNS management. You wouldn't have those if you're sitting on your home network. On a corporate network, you may, but not in the home network, because it's just cost prohibitive. So what we have is a virtual private network that's connecting these home networks to your corporate network. Well, what you'll end up, I should say, what you should also add is what's called a cloud service. So you also have cloud services that's adding to the whole thing. So the ways into your data, your intellectual property, to what you want to protect, have significantly, the surface of attack has significantly increased because of working from home. So the new attack strategy is a hybrid of all of that. That means we as the cyber defenders, we as corporations and enterprises need to move the defense to the endpoint itself. And I will get into the being a bit more prescriptive in a moment, but I want to say that in the previous 2 slides, I talked about how the old approach was, how the new mix-up is, and now here's a new strategy or surface of attack, and we need to move the defenses specifically to the endpoints. Working from home also means we have to enable certain tools. One of the tools that's commonly used actually by perpetrators to break into a corporation is RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. RDP is built into the operating system, and it is a useful tool. I'm not suggesting that it is not. However, it exposes, whether it's a server, whether it's just an endpoint, it exposes it to the internet, which means you can brute force your way in. Brute forcing is repeating different sequences of passwords until you find a way in, until you're able to exploit and get your way into the system. See, if you expose something to the internet, the number of tries can be infinite, and they don't have to be rapid. They can be slow and low attacks until the perpetrator finds the correct sequence or password, or is exposed, or an RDP is exposed, and they can break into your corporation. Offensive tools. Mimikatz. Mimikatz, of course, most will know, and those of you who don't, it's a password or credential dumping tool. Once you're in, and your perpetrator will always go after the servers first. Because on a server, if I can get the credentials, that is all the network tokens that I need, all the Kerberos tokens that I need in order to move laterally or move horizontally in your network, plus passwords. Once I have the administrator passwords, I can now take it to the next stage at the bottom of your screen: disable security, disable login, turn off anti-malware, et cetera, et cetera. So manual infection is very much in place. It actually doesn't take very much. All of these tools are readily available. An example of this is the Cobol Strike. I won't read the notes to you, but it was a commercial, full-featured penetration testing tool, which bills itself as an adversary simulation software designed to execute targeted attacks and emulate the post-exploitation action of advanced threat actors. Cobol Strike is a tool, yes, but it is meant as a pen testing tool. Unfortunately, the perpetrators also use that as a means of getting in. Lateral movement. In order to launch a company-wide attack, like ransomware, especially by criminals, they try to hop to every endpoint on the network and infect them, so that you don't just lose one endpoint, you lose multiple endpoints in a complete department. Zero logon and new vulnerability. So this zero logon you can read my notes there. It's a critical vulnerability in Windows NetLogon remote protocol. This is not new. It's been out for quite some time. You should have already patched this, but it gives attackers domain administrator access within seconds. It doesn't take very long to infiltrate and go further into the network. If you want to read more about this, and most of my prescription, what I'm going to prescribe, what I'm going to recommend that you consider to protect your environment in order to prepare yourself for a ransomware attack, comes from the kill chain. This information comes from NIST. There is something called CISA, and you can actually see it on your screen. I'm going to put my mouse over so that you see it. It's CISA. And this is a prescriptive document that you can go ahead and download. It is just copy and paste that into Google. Make sure you download it from NIST, NIST, .gov website. Determine which system has been impacted. So it's very prescriptive. What do I do when I am hit by a ransomware? So this requires you to be proactive, to actually have this plan in place before you start. So determine which systems are impacted, verify true positive, and disconnect it from the network, or isolate or quarantine, whichever word you like, but make sure you disconnect that particular one from the networks, but you need to be in control of it. Triage for restoration and recovery. So you now need to take it to the next stage, which is I've got to restore the system and recover my data. And I'll be more prescriptive in just a minute. And then review the lessons learned. How did the perpetrator get in? Was it RDP? Is my RDP exposed? Was it an exploit of an application? You need to know these things in order to prevent it from happening again. Otherwise, simply restoring and recovering the system in and of itself is not sufficient. So I don't have, unfortunately for me, I don't have the time to go through each single one. That's why I gave you the document on the screen that you can go look up, the CISA recommendations. But the point is, if I boiled it down to just 4 things, it would be the 4 things that you're seeing on your screen. I'm sorry, 5 things. Mitigate it from happening again, of course, because once you have the lessons learned, you don't want to repeat the cycle. This particular portion, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on. So if I could have your attention for at least, I would say, 4 minutes, because it takes me a while to go through the slide. This should be your security roadmap. It is not the only part of your roadmap. Your roadmap is going to be specific to your environment, but I'm giving you the minimum set required in order to either be proactive, so I'm going to point at it, proactive security, and then adaptive security. Depending on how much and which ones you implement will depend on your tolerance. Is your tolerance for risk high? Or is your tolerance for risk low? Your tolerance for risk would be high if you do not have credit card information, you do not have personal identifiable information, you do not have any intellectual property to protect, you do not have any health information that you're storing. You simply are using your computer to connect to the internet, which is not true. But if that's all you're doing, then your tolerance for risk is a bit higher. And as it is higher, you can get away with a minimum set of security things that you, security solutions or tools that you see in the vertical bar, this particular bar going over here. So email gateway, at a minimum, you should have some email gateway that scans your emails before it gets to the endpoint. You can do that on a subscription basis. There are many solutions to do it. I won't cover every single one of these, but I want to talk about proactive. Proactive that I will be focusing on is antivirus or anti-malware or endpoint protection. Those may have many different names, but they're all very, very similar. Make sure at a minimum you have one of these solutions on your systems. In fact, you shouldn't be able to buy a computer without them. If you have those, at a minimum, you should have two-factor authentication, but that isn't enough. Please consider multi-factor authentication. Two-factor is no longer sufficient. Simply receiving a text on your phone is not enough. You need an additional layer above that, and that's called multi-factor authentication, or MFA. EDR, endpoint detection and response. It should be, this is not necessarily a proactive, it can also be adaptive, but EDR is the next layer of protection that you should have on your endpoints. All of these ones that I've placed here are for larger enterprises, and at a minimum, you're going to need what's called an incident response procedure. You're going to need some form of SIM or XDR, where you're receiving logs from multiple different things, not just endpoints, but also from other systems or cloud services or whatever else that you might be using in order to correlate the information and to see if a perpetrator is actually moving across your network. Threat intelligence, also important. Red team, blue team, threat hunting, and orchestration. For those that have very large corporations, and by large to me is anything over, I'm going to say about 3,000 to 5,000 endpoints, security orchestration is going to be important to you. So you should be considering a solution that is in this category of products. So mitigating ransomware. What do I have to do is the question I wanted to answer at the very beginning. What do we have to do in order to mitigate, what solution should you implement? This is more prescription than it is a recommendation. At a minimum, you need to have remote visibility to your endpoints that are connected to your network. That's absolutely essential. So that's why you saw in the previous slide, and I'm going to go back one slide for just a moment. In the previous slide, I said, EDR, is that proactive? Is that adaptive? You could argue for either. And I am saying that it is, the complexity of implementing EDR, it's actually very light. It's not a complicated thing to implement it, to get it going, started, and configure it and set it up. So you should have that. I would start there when you are ready to be more prescriptive. Threat remediation and alerting. Very important. Remediation, when I say remediation, I'm actually being more specific. Let me be more specific. I'm referring to malware eradication. When you have malware, it could be ransomware, or it could be some other type of malware that is going to lead to ransomware. But when you get malware, malware isn't just a binary executable. It's not just a script. It's a script that may have a binary executable, that may have libraries. The libraries may get installed in different places. It could have registry keys. It could have multiple other components. So your remediation must include malware eradication. And to, I'm going still on the second bullet point here, still talking about remediation. Malware eradication, yes, you could say, you know what, I'll just reimage the system. Well, if we're all working from home, how are you going to do that? Your solution should have remote malware eradication. Alerting speaks for itself, and that's the and part here. Payload analysis. What if you have a binary executable, someone sends you a spreadsheet, you want to be able to upload this into some sort of a sandbox to analyze it so that you can understand it before it gets opened on a particular endpoint. Ransomware rollback, an essential component. Now you can see this is a little bit more complex, but it is an essential component for your data files. You don't want to roll back the whole system, that's too complex. You want to be able to roll back just your data files. You want to be able to recover them, and you should have, at a minimum, a backup that you keep offline, a backup that you do weekly, but a backup of the data that you keep online, right? That's essential. So, and I'll go into that. There are companies, of course, we offer rollback, but whatever your solution is, you need to make sure you have ransomware rollback. Guided threat hunting, that requires a higher level of complexity, but that is definitely something that your EDR solution should have. So in conclusion, tactics are being switched. I already talked about the tactics are changing because they're continuously, it's a life cycle of tactics. That's how I started off, where it evolves. The perpetrators are running a business, a nefarious business, a ill business, and not a good business for that matter, but a very profitable business. We, as defenders, must enable our employees. And by that, I mean to enable the employees so that they can, they have a better line of defense, that they have the tools and the resources and the knowledge to be able to inform you, to keep you posted, but also to be defended, to defend our employees. Complexity. Complexity is what actually causes, I'm not saying causes, excuse me, can and may be a source or a cause for something to not be effective. So your EDR solution should not be so complicated where your own staff are having to do the threat hunting themselves, to enter their own indicators of compromise, or have to go buy third-party knowledge in order to know what an indicator of compromise is, then come and threat hunt. That's too complicated. Perhaps if you have the resources, you certainly can do that. My point being, complexity will work against you if your solution is too complex in order to implement it. Resource allocation speaks for itself. Let me go on to talk about Malwarebytes. Malwarebytes not only allows you to download our evaluation software, but we have a business solution. Yes, this slide looks very busy. I understand that. But you can see that we sell solutions that allow you to eradicate malware as a component of remediation. We also sell you a solution to detect and protect. So that's the prevention aspect. And we sell the solution where you can respond and recover. And I talked about respond and recover in 2 different bullet points. I said one should be ransomware rollback, very important. so that you can recover your data, and respond being the malware eradication, of course, which is a component of remediation. Cloud services. It's essential that this is cloud-based because your solution is going to need to be updated and kept up to date. And in fact, if there is anything that's on-prem, it's on its way out. You need to consider cloud solutions. It's all vendors, software vendors that provide security are moving to the cloud for a special reason, for a simple reason, I should say. The simple reason is this: to maintain the solution, to update it, to improve it, to get its detection rates higher, it can be done through the cloud much faster. One. Two, perhaps the second point is more important, is that devices are now mobile, be it a laptop or any other form of device. It's mobile. It's going to go from place to place. It's going to be working from home. It's going to be working from somewhere else that's connected. So availability of connectivity should not require VPN, but it should be secure enough that it can work on a cloud-based solution. I won't talk about this. Of course, you need to cover Mac, Windows, and Linux platforms, depending on your environment. Essentially, what I wanted to tell you is that we do offer those solutions, and I'll stop talking about our product. You can certainly get more information from us afterwards. A word about don't pay the ransomware. I am not prescribing that. That's actually prescribed by the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States. It's prescribed by many defense agencies of many countries, not just the North America. Don't pay the ransomware. It's the reason I'm having a hard time just leaving it here and just leave it up and move on to the next thing is because ultimately you need to make the decision whether you do or don't. But understand, the moment you pay the ransomware, you are enabling the perpetrators to do more research, to build better tools, to attack you, to have an opportunity to perform the attack. It is a conundrum. I fully understand that. At the same time, I am not saying you actually must do this. That is, don't pay the ransom. I'm leaving it to you, but I do request of all our audience that are listening to this recording that you consider this closely, because when you pay it, you actually are enabling the perpetrators through funds, of course. Thank you very much for your attention.
Agradecemos a Robert ZAMANI por su participación en el IT Solutions Day.